there, everyone. Today the Bookworms are going to be reading Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator, written by Roald Dahl. Chapter 4. The President. Half a mile back, Shuckworth, Shanks, and Showler were keeping the television camera aimed all the time at the glass elevator. And across the world, millions and millions of people were clustered around their TV screens, watching tensely the drama being acted out 240 miles above the earth. In his study in the White House sat Lancelot R. Gillygrass, President of the United States of America, the most powerful man on earth. In this moment of crisis, all his most important advisors had been summoned urgently to his presence, and there they all were now, following closely on the giant television screen every move made by this dangerous-looking glass capsule and its 8 desperate-looking astronauts. The entire cabinet was present. The chief of the army was there, together with 4 other generals. There was the chief of the Navy and the chief of the Air Force and a Swartzwallerer from Afghanistan, who was the president's best friend. There was the president's chief financial advisor, who was standing in the middle of the room trying to balance the budget on top of his head, but it kept falling off. Standing nearest of all to the president was the vice president, a huge lady of 89 with a whiskery chin. She had been the president's nurse when he was a baby, and her name was Miss Tibbs. Miss Tibbs was the power behind the throne. She stood no nonsense from anyone. Some people said she was as strict with the president now as when he was a little boy. She was a terror of the White House, and even the head of the Secret Service broke into a sweat when summoned to her presence. Only the president was allowed to call her Nanny. The president's famous cat, Mrs. Topsypuss, was also in the room. There was absolute silence now in the presidential study. All eyes were riveted on the TV screen as a small glass object with its booster rockets firing slid smoothly up behind the giant space hotel. "They're going to link up!" shouted the president. "They're going on board our space hotel." "They're going to blow it up!" cried the chief of the army. "Let's blow them up first! Crash, bang, wallop, bang, bang, bang!" The chief of the army was wearing so many metal ribbons they covered the entire front of his tunic on both sides and spread down onto his trousers as well. "Come on, Mr. P," he said. "Let's have some really super-duper explosions." "Silence, you silly boy," said Mrs. Tibbs, and the chief of the army slunk into a corner. "Listen," said the president. "The point is this. Who are they, and where do they come from? Where's my chief spy?" "Here, sir, Mr. President, sir," said the chief spy. He had a false mustache, a false beard, false eyelashes, false teeth, and a falsetto voice. "Knock, knock," said the president. "Who's there?" said the chief spy. "Courtney." "Courtney who?" "Courtney one yet," said the president. There was a brief silence. "The president asked you a question," said Miss Tibbs in an icy voice. "Have you Courtney one yet?" "No, ma'am, not yet," said the chief spy, beginning to twitch. "Well, here's your chance," snarled Miss Tibbs. "Quite right," said the president. "Tell me immediately who those people are in that glass capsule." "Aha!" said the chief spy, twirling his false mustache. "That is a very difficult question." "You mean you don't know?" "I mean I do know, Mr. President. At least I think I know. Listen, we have just launched the finest hotel in the world, right?" "Right! And who is so madly jealous of this wonderful hotel of ours that he wants to blow it up?" "Miss Tibbs," said the president. "Wrong," said the chief spy. "Try again." "Well," said the president, thinking deeply. "In that case, could it not perhaps be some other hotel owner who is envious of our lovely hotel?" "Brilliant!" cried the chief spy. "Go on, sir, you're getting warm." "It's Mr. Savoy," said the president. "Warmer and warmer, Mr. President." "Mr. Ritz?" "You're hot, sir, you're boiling hot. Go on." "I've got it," cried the president. "It's Mr. Hilton." "Well done, sir," said the chief spy. "Are you sure it's him?" "Not sure, but it's certainly a warm possibility, Mr. President. After all, Mr. Hilton's got hotels in just about every country in the world, but he hasn't got one in space. And we have. He must be madder than a maggot." "By gum, we'll soon fix this," snapped the president, grabbing one of the 11 telephones on his desk. "Hello?" he said into the phone. "Hello, hello, hello? Where's the operator?" He jiggled furiously on the little thing you jiggle when you want the operator. "Operator, where are you?" "They won't answer, you know," said Miss Tibbs. "They're all watching television." "Well, this one'll answer," said the president, snatching up a bright red telephone. This was a hotline direct to the premier of Soviet Russia in Moscow. It was always open and only used in terrible emergencies. It's just as likely to be the Russians as Mr. Hilton, the president went on. Don't you agree, Nanny? It's bound to be the Russians, said Miss Tibbs. Premier Yegorov speaking, said a voice from Moscow. What's on your mind, Mr. President? Knock, knock, said the president. Who's there, said the Soviet premier. Warren. Warren who? War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, said the president. Now see here, Yegorov. You get those astronauts of yours off that space hotel of ours this instant. Otherwise, I'm afraid we're going to have to show you just where you get off, Yegorov. Those astronauts are not Russians, Mr. President. He's lying, said Miss Tibbs. You're lying, said the president. Not lying, sir, said Premier Yegorov. Have you looked closely at those astronauts in the glass box? I myself cannot see them too clearly on my TV screen, but one of them, the little one with the pointed beard and the top hat, has a distinctly Chinese look about him. In fact, he reminds me very much of my friend, the Prime Minister of China. Great garbage, cried the president, slamming down the red phone and picking up a porcelain one. The porcelain phone went direct to the head of the Chinese Republic in Peking. Hello, 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 said the president. Wing's Fish and Vegetable Store in Shanghai, said a small, distant voice. Mr. Wing speaking. Nanny, cried the president, banging down the phone. I thought this was a direct line to the premier. It is, said Miss Tibbs. Try again. The president picked up the receiver. Hello, he yelled. Mr. Wong speaking, said a voice at the other end. Mr. Who? Screamed the president. Mr. Wong, Assistant Station Master, Chung King. And if you're asking about 10 o'clock land, 10 o'clock land, no landing today. Boiler burst. The president threw the phone across the room at the postmaster general. It hit him in the stomach. What's the matter with this thing? Shouted the president. It is very difficult to phone people in China, Mr. President, said the postmaster general. The country is so full of wings and wongs, every time you wing, you get the wong number. You're not kidding, said the president. The postmaster general replaced the telephone on the desk. Try it just once more, Mr. President, please, he said. I've tightened the screws underneath. The president again picked up the receiver. Greetings, Honorable Mr. President, said a soft, faraway voice. Here is Assistant Premier Chuan speaking. How can I do for you? Knock, knock, said the president. Who's her? Ginger. Ginger who? Ginger yourself much when you fell off the Great Wall of China? Said the president. Okay, Chuan, let me speak to Premier. How you been? Much regret, Premier, how you been? Not here just this second, Mr. President. Where is he? He outside mending a puncture on his bicycle. Oh, no, he isn't, said the president. You can't fool me, you crafty old mandarin. At this very minute, he's boarding our magnificent space hotel with 7 other rascals to blow it up. Excuse, please, Mr. President. You make big mistake. No mistake, barked the president. And if you don't call them off right away, I'm going to tell my chief of the army to blow them all sky high. So chew on that, chew on that. Hooray! Said the chief of the army. Let's blow everyone up! Bang, 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 bang! Silence! Barked Miss Tibbs. I've done it, cried the chief financial advisor. Look at me, everybody! I've balanced the budget. And indeed he had. He stood proudly in the middle of the room with his enormous $200 billion budget balanced beautifully on the top of his bald head. Everyone clapped. Then suddenly, the voice of astronaut Shuckworth cut in urgently on the radio loudspeaker in the president's study. They've linked up and gone on board, shouted Shuckworth. And they've taken the the bomb. The president sucked in his breath sharply. He also sucked in a big fly that happened to be passing at the time. He choked. Miss Tibbs thumped him on the back. He swallowed the fly and felt better. But he was very angry. He seized pencil and paper and began to draw a picture. As he drew, he kept muttering, I won't have flies in my office. I won't put up with them. His advisors waited eagerly. They knew that the great man was about to give the world yet another of his brilliant inventions. The last had been the gillygrass left-handed corkscrew, which had been hailed by left-handers across the nation as one of the greatest blessings of the century. There you are, said the president, holding up the paper. This is the gillygrass patent fly trap. They all crowded round to look. The fly climbs up the ladder on the left, said the president. He walks along the plank. He stops. He sniffs. He smells something good. He peers over the edge and sees the sugar lump. Aha! He cries. Sugar! He is just about to climb down the string to reach it when he sees the basin of water below. "Ho ho," he says. "It's a trap! They want me to fall in." So he walks on, thinking what a clever fly he is. But as you see, I have left out one of the rungs in the ladder he goes down by, so he falls and breaks his neck. "Tremendous, Mr. President," they all exclaimed. "Fantastic! A stroke of genius." "I wish to order 100,000 for the army immediately," said the chief of the army. "Thank you," said the president, making a careful note of the order. "I repeat," said the frantic voice of Shuckworth over the loudspeaker, "they've gone on board and taken the bomb with them." "Stay well clear of them, Shuckworth," ordered the president. "There's no point in getting your boys blown up as well." And now, all over the world, the millions of watchers waited more tensely than ever in front of their television sets. The picture on their screens, in vivid color, showed the sinister little glass box securely linked up to the underbelly of the gigantic space hotel. It looked like some tiny baby animal clinging to its mother. And when the camera zoomed closer, it was clear for all to see that the glass box was completely empty. All 8 of the desperados had climbed into the space hotel, and they had taken their bomb with them. Chapter 5. Men from Mars. There was no floating inside the space hotel. The gravity-making machine saw to that. So once the docking had been triumphantly achieved, Mr. Wonka, Charlie, Grandpa Joe, and Mr. and Mrs. Bucket were able to walk out of the great glass elevator into the lobby of the hotel. As for Grandpa George, Grandma Georgina, and Grandma Josephine, none of them had had their feet on the ground for over 20 years, and they certainly weren't going to change their habits now. So when the floating stopped, they all 3 plopped right back into bed again and insisted that the bed with them in it be pushed into the space hotel. Charlie gazed around the huge lobby. On the floor there was a thick green carpet. 20 tremendous chandeliers hung shimmering from the ceiling. The walls were covered with valuable pictures, and there were big soft armchairs all over the place. At the far end of the room, there were the doors of 5 lifts. The group stared in silence at all this luxury. Nobody dared speak. Mr. Wonka had warned them that every word they uttered would be picked up by Space Control in Houston, so they had better be careful. A faint humming noise came from somewhere below the floor, but that only made the silence more spooky. Charlie took hold of Grandpa Joe's hand and held it tight. He wasn't sure he liked this very much. They had broken into the greatest machine ever built by man, the property of the United States government, and if they were discovered and captured, as they surely must be in the end, what would happen to them then? Jail for life? Yes, or something worse. Mr. Wonka was writing on a little pad. He held up the pad. It said, "Anybody hungry?" The 3 old ones in the bed began waving their arms and nodding and opening and shutting their mouths. Mr. Wonka turned the paper over. On the other side, it said, "The kitchens of this hotel are loaded with luscious food, lobsters, steaks, ice cream. We shall have a feast to end all feasts." Suddenly, a tremendous booming voice came out of the loudspeaker hidden somewhere in the room. "Attention!" boomed the voice, and Charlie jumped. So did Grandpa Joe. Everybody jumped, even Mr. Wonka. "Attention, the 8 foreign astronauts. This is Space Control in Houston, Texas, USA. You are trespassing on American property. You are ordered to identify yourselves immediately. Speak now." "Shh," whispered Mr. Wonka, finger to lips. There followed a few seconds of awful silence. Nobody moved except Mr. Wonka, who kept saying, "Shh, shh." "Who are you?" boomed the voice from Houston, and the whole world heard it. "I repeat, who are you?" shouted the urgent, angry voice. And 500 million people crouched in front of their television sets, waiting for an answer to come from the mysterious strangers inside the space hotel. The television was not able to show a picture of these mysterious strangers. There was no camera in there to record the scene. Only the words came through. The TV watchers saw nothing but the outside of the giant hotel in orbit, photographed, of course, by Shuckworth, Shanks, and Showler, who were following behind. For half a minute the world waited for a reply, but no reply came. "Speak!" boomed the voice. getting louder and louder and ending in a fearful, frightening shout that rattled Charlie's eardrums. "Speak! Speak! Speak!" Grandma Georgina shot under the sheet. Grandma Josephine stuck her fingers in her ears. Grandpa George buried his head in the pillow. Mr. and Mrs. Bucket, both petrified, were once again in each other's arms. Charlie was clutching Grandpa Joe's hand, and the two of them were staring at Mr. Wonka and begging him with their eyes to do something. Mr. Wonka stood very still, and although his face looked calm, you can be quite sure his clever, inventive brain was spinning like a dynamo. "This is your last chance," boomed the voice. "We are asking you once more, who are you? Reply immediately. If you do not reply, we shall be forced to regard you as dangerous enemies. We shall then press the emergency freezer switch, and the temperature in the Space Hotel will drop to minus 100 degrees centigrade. All of you will be instantly deep frozen. You have 15 seconds to speak. After that, you will turn into icicles. 1, 2, 3. "Grandpa!" whispered Charlie as the counting continued. "We must do something. We must! Quick!" 6, said the voice. 7, 8, 9. Mr. Wonka had not moved. He was still gazing straight ahead, still quite cool, perfectly expressionless. Charlie and Grandpa Joe were staring at him in horror. Then, all at once, they saw the tiny twinkling wrinkles of a smile appear around the corners of his eyes. He sprang to life. He spun round on his toes, skipped a few paces across the floor, and then, in a frenzied, unearthly sort of scream, he cried, "Fimbo fees!" The loudspeaker stopped counting. There was silence. All over the world, there was silence. Charlie's eyes were riveted on Mr. Wonka. He was going to speak again. He was taking a deep breath. "Bungo Booney!" he screamed. He put so much force into his voice that the effort lifted him right up onto his tips of his toes. "Bungo Booney! Daffo Dooney! Ubi Looney!" Again, the silence. The next time Mr. Wonka spoke, the words came out so fast and sharp and loud, they were like bullets from a machine gun. "Zunk! Zunk! 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 Zunk!" he barked. The noise echoed around and around the lobby of the Space Hotel. It echoed around the world. Mr. Wonka now turned and faced the far end of the lobby where the loudspeaker voice had come from. He walked a few paces forward, as a man would, perhaps, who wanted a more intimate conversation with his audience. And this time, the tone was much quieter. The words came more slowly, but there was a touch of steel in every syllable. "Kirasuku Malibuku, Weeby Weezy an Yubi Kuku. Alipenda Kakamenda, Pants Foldon Infu Suspenda, Fuika Kandarika, Weeby Stronga Yubi Wika, Papakoda Borkmuka, Very Risky Ya Provoca, Caddy Caddy Moons and Stars, Fan Phoenicia Venus Mars." Mr. Wonka paused dramatically for a few seconds. Then he took an enormous deep breath, and in a wild and fearsome voice he yelled out, "Kitimbibi Zunk! Fumbleezy Zunk! Gugumiza Zunk! Fumi Kaka Zunk! Anapalala Zunk! Zunk! Zunk!" The effect of all this on the world below was electric. In the control room in Houston, in the White House in Washington, in palaces and city buildings and mountain shacks from America to China to Peru, the 500 million people who heard that wild and fearsome voice yelling out these strange and mystic words all shivered with fear before their television sets. Everybody began turning to everybody else and saying, "Who are they? What language was that? Where do they come from?" In the president's study in the White House, Vice President Tibbs, the members of the cabinet, the chiefs of the Army and the Navy and the Air Force, the sword swallower from Afghanistan, the chief financial advisor, and Mrs. Topsy-Puss the cat all stood tense and rigid. They were very much afraid, but the president himself kept a cool head and a clear brain. "Nanny!" he cried. "Oh, Nanny, what on earth do we do now?" "I'll get you a nice warm glass of milk," said Miss Tibbs. "I hate the stuff," said the president. "Please don't make me drink it." Summon the chief interpreter, said Miss Tibbs. Summon the chief interpreter, said the president. Where is he? Right here, Mr. President, said the chief interpreter. What language was that creature spouting up there in the space hotel? Be quick! Was it Eskimo? Not Eskimo, Mr. President. Ha! Then it was Tagalog. Either Tagalog or Ugro. Not Tagalog, Mr. President. Not Ugro either. Was it Tulu then? Or Tungus? Or Tupi? Definitely not Tulu, Mr. President. And I'm quite sure it wasn't Tungus or Tupi. Don't stand there telling him what it wasn't, you idiot, said Miss Tibbs. Tell him what it was. Yes, ma'am. Miss Vice President, ma'am, said the chief interpreter, beginning to shake. Believe me, Mr. President, he went on, it was not a language I have ever heard before. But I thought you knew every language in the world. I do, Mr. President. Don't lie to me, chief interpreter. How can you possibly know every language in the world when you don't know this one? It's not a language of this world, Mr. President. Nonsense, man, barked Miss Tibbs. I understood some of it myself. These people, Miss Vice President, ma'am, have obviously tried to learn just a few of our easier words, but the rest of it is a language that has never been heard before on this earth. Screaming scorpions, cried the president. You mean to tell me they could be coming from somewhere else? Precisely, Mr. President. Like where? Said the president. Who knows? Said the chief interpreter. But did you not notice, Mr. President, how they use the words Venus and Mars? Of course I noticed it, said the president. But what's that got to do with it? Aha! I see what you're driving at. Good gracious me! Men from Mars! And Venus, said the chief interpreter. That, said the president, could make for trouble. I'll say it could, said the chief interpreter. He wasn't talking to you, said Miss Tibbs. What do we do now, General? Said the president. Blow him up, cried the general. You're always wanting to blow things up, said the president crossly. Can't you think of something else? I like blowing things up, said the general. It makes such a lovely noise. Whoomp, whoomp. Don't be a fool, said Miss Tibbs. If you blow these people up, Mars will declare war on us. So will Venus. Quite right, Nanny, said the president. We'd be troculated like turkeys. Every one of us. We'd be mashed like potatoes. I'll take him on, shouted the chief of the army. Shut up, snapped Miss Tibbs. You're fired. Hooray, said all the other generals. Well done, Miss Vice President, ma'am, Miss Tibbs said. We've got to treat these fellows gently. The one who spoke just now sounded extremely cross. We've got to be polite to them, butter them up, make them happy. The last thing we want is to be invaded by men from Mars. You've got to talk to them, Mr. President. Tell Houston we want another direct radio link with the Space Hotel. And hurry! Chapter 6. Invitation to the White House. The President of the United States will now address you, announced a loudspeaker voice in the lobby of the Space Hotel. Grandma Georgina's head peeped cautiously out from under the sheets. Grandma Josephine took her fingers out of her ears, and Grandpa George lifted his face out of the pillow. You mean he's actually going to speak to us? Whispered Charlie. Shh, said Mr. Wonka. Listen. Dear friends, said the well-known presidential voice over the loudspeaker. Dear, dear friends, welcome to Space Hotel USA. Greetings to the brave astronauts from Mars and Venus. Mars and Venus? Whispered Charlie. You mean he thinks we're from... Shh, 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 said Mr. Wonka. He was doubled up with silent laughter, shaking all over and hopping from one foot to the other. You have come a long way, the president continued, so why don't you come just a tiny bit farther and pay us a visit down here on our humble little Earth? I invite all 8 of you to stay with me here in Washington as my honored guests. You could land that wonderful glass air machine of yours on the lawn in back of the White House. We shall have the red carpet out and ready. I do hope you know enough of our language to understand me. I shall wait most anxiously for your reply. There was a click, and the president went off the air. What a fantastic thing, whispered Grandpa Joe. The White House, Charlie. We're invited to the White House as honored guests. Charlie caught hold of Grandpa Joe's hands, and the two of them started dancing round and round the lobby of the hotel. Mr. Wonka, still shaking with laughter, went and sat down on the bed and signaled everyone to gather round close so they could whisper without being heard by the hidden microphones. "They're scared to death," he whispered. "They won't bother us any more now. So let's have the feast we were talking about, and afterwards we can explore the hotel." "Aren't we going to the White House?" whispered Grandma Josephine. "I want to go to the White House and stay with the president." "My dear old Dotty Dumpling," said Mr. Wonka, "you look as much like a man from Mars as a bedbug. They'd know at once they'd been fooled. We'd be arrested before we could say how do you do." Mr. Wonka was right. There could be no question of accepting the president's invitation, and they all knew it. "But we've got to say something to him," Charlie whispered. "He must be sitting down there in the White House this very minute waiting for an answer." "Make an excuse," said Mr. Bucket. "Tell him we're otherwise engaged," said Mrs. Bucket. "You are right," whispered Mr. Wonka. "It is rude to ignore an invitation." He stood up and walked a few paces from the group. For a moment or two he remained quite still, gathering his thoughts. Then once again, Charlie saw those tiny twinkling smiling wrinkles around the corners of his eyes, and when he began to speak, his voice this time was like the voice of a giant, deep and devilish, very loud and very slow. "In the quelchy, quaggy sogmire, in the mashy, medius harshland, at the witchy hour of gloomness, all the grobes come oozing home. You can hear them softly sliming, glistening, hissing over the slubber, all those oily, boily bodies oozing onward in the gloam. So start to run, oh, skid and daddle, through the slubber, slush, and sossle. Skip, jump, hop, and try to scattle. All the grobes are on the roam." In his study, 240,000 miles below, the president turned white as the White House. "Jumping jackrabbits!" he cried. "I think they're after us." "Oh, please, let me blow them up," said the ex-chief of the army. "Silence!" said Miss Tibbs. "Go stand in the corner." In the lobby of the Space Hotel, Mr. Wonka had merely paused in order to think up another verse, and he was just about to start off again when a frightful, piercing scream stopped him cold. The screamer was Grandma Josephine. She was sitting up in bed and pointing with a shaking finger at the lifts at the far end of the lobby. She screamed a second time, still pointing, and all eyes turned toward the lifts. The door of the one on the left was sliding slowly open, and the watchers could clearly see that there was something thick, something brown. Something not exactly brown, but greenish brown. Something with slimy skin and large eyes squatting inside the lift. That's it for today, everyone. I really hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more read-alongs. See you next time. Bye!